go. Chapter 11. 11. إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهديه الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله اللهم صل وسلم وبارك عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. Inshallah ta'ala, we continue with Kitab At-Tawheed, and we had reached chapter لا يذبح لله بمكان يذبح فيه لغير الله. Is that 10 or 11? 11, okay. So the title of the chapter again, لا يذبح لله بمكان يذبح فيه لغير الله, which is right after the previous one, which talked about الذبح or slaughtering for other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as a matter of shirk, since this is a matter of ibadah. قل إن صلاتي ونسكي ومحياي ومماتي لله رب العالمين لا شريك له وبذلك أمرت وأنا أول المسلمين. That indeed my salah and my nusuk, the nusuk is the slaughtering, and my life and my death is all for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is ibadah, like the sujood, like the dua. Slaughtering is to be only to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We're not talking about the fiqh matter of it, but we're talking about the matter of the tawheed there. Is if someone slaughtered to the jinn or to other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or to someone that is dead, the subject of sacrifice. These matters, if it's not done to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone, then this is a matter of shirk, associating partners with Allah. The next chapter, which is لا يذبح لله بمكان يذبح فيه لغير الله, which means not to slaughter for the sake of Allah in a place where people would slaughter in it for other than Allah. To that extent, as you see, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protected this deen, cutting all the leads and the means that would lead to what is evil. And this is how this religion is beautiful and well structured and strong. Nothing is left. So if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forbade something, He would also forbade the things that would lead to it. And therefore, one of the things is this subject. لا يذبح لله. This is the title of the subject. Someone is slaughtering something for the sake of Allah, not for any other thing whatsoever, only for the sake of Allah, and even in the proper way and saying Bismillah. But in a place where people would slaughter in the place for the sake of other than Allah. So where there's shirk is committed in that place, then it is not permissible for a muwahhid, someone upon the tawheed, to slaughter there for the sake of Allah. To avoid and to stay away completely from what leads to a shirk, which is the worst thing that can ever happen on the face of earth, associating partners with Allah. And then he mentioned one verse and one hadith. One verse and one hadith. And we might go to the next chapter, if Sheikh Faisal allows us, inshallah. 45 minutes or so, inshallah ta'ala. So, and we'll see the benefits also, inshallah ta'ala, after the chapter is mentioned. The ayah is وَقَوْلِ اللَّهِ تَعَالَى لَا تَقُمْ فِيهِ أَبَدًا. لَا تَقُمْ فِيهِ أَبَدًا. And this is in Surah At-Tawbah. Surah number 108. The verse is part of a verse that talks about when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forbade the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam from praying in a masjid, Masjid al-Dirar. The masjid was built by the hypocrites. It's a masjid, it's a house of worship, supposed to be, but was built by the hypocrites for an evil reason, to be a refuge for the enemies of Allah when they come, to go against the masjid of the Prophet ﷺ. So the intention of it was not for the sake of Allah, even though it's a masjid. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forbade the Prophet ﷺ from praying there, and that masjid was even destroyed. So something that was supposed to, or to look to be a masjid or a place of worship, but he used this verse as an evidence clearly that how the لا تقم, do not pray there, do not establish the salah in this Masjid Ad-Dirar that the hypocrites they built to commit sins and to disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the same thing applies if there is a place where people would commit shirk, associating partners with Allah. Do not slaughter in that place, meaning for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because that place is meant for people to commit shirk. So it's the same manner. So the hadith doesn't have to be directly as an evidence to this, but it shows the principle of it. The verse, I mean. Then the hadith is clear in the subject, and he says عن ثابت بن الضحاك رضي الله عنه قال نذر رجل أن ينحر إبلا ببوانة. I'll read the hadith first inshallah ta'ala, and we go word by word inshallah. فسأل النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم فقال هل كان فيه وثن من أوثان الجاهلية يعبد؟ قالوا لا. قال فهل كان فيها عيد من أعيادهم؟ قالوا لا. فقال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم أوف بنذرك فإنه لا وفاء لنذر في معصية الله ولا فيما لا يملك ابن آدم. يقول رواه أبو داود وإسناده على شرطهما. So ثابت ibn الضحاك رضي الله عنه, he's the narrator of the hadith, he said نذر رجل أن ينحر إبلا ببوانة. A man, رجل, nadhar, that means he made a vow, he made a nadhr. And nadhr is when someone makes something that is permissible, he make it as an obligation upon him. And there are different categories of a nadhr, and this also leads to the next chapter, but without going into details. Maybe if we have time, we can talk about this. So he made a nadhr, that means he made a vow that a person would say. It has to be uttered with one's words, cannot be an intention in the heart. It has to be said clearly, that a person would say that upon him, that he obligates upon him, or it's upon him to do this, especially if it's a matter of ibadah, that he would pray that many raka'at, that he would slaughter an animal or whatever there is, whether it's conditioned or not conditioned. If he passes his exams, he will do this. If he's sick, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give him cure, he would slaughter an animal. All of these types of things, it's called a vow. And whether this is something permissible or not, of course it's permissible unless certain conditions, when a person would make it as a condition. Some of the ulama, they said it's makruh or even not permissible because of the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that will come inshallah. One of which is you making something as an obligation upon you when you had the ease not to have any obligation upon yourself. So anyway, so this man, he made a nadhr, and once a person makes a nadhr, then he has to fulfill it, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala described the believers, that they are yufuna bin nadhr. They fulfill the nadhr. If there is a nadhr, a vow upon them, they would fulfill it. So this man made a nadhr. So that means the nadhr has to be fulfilled. What is the nadhr? An yanhara ibilan bibuwana, that he would yanhar. An nahr is the slaughtering of the camels, which is the way that they slaughter the camel is that they would stab it in the neck and then they move the knife to slaughter it. Different than when you slaughter a goat or a sheep, for example, because of the camel, the same thing can be applied for the cows. It starts with stabbing and then it goes with, cutting the jugular vein. So here he made a nadhr that an yanhar, and both, whether it's a sheep or a cow or anything, you can use the word an-nahr, but the nahr is specific for the camels or the cows. So he made a nadhr that he would slaughter ibilan, which means camels, bi buwana. Buwana is a place, is a specific place, right by Yambo or something of that place, close to the sea. So he made a nadhr to slaughter camels at a specific place. So the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام فسأل النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم. The man asked the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام should he fulfill his vow or not. فقال, the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام said, and this is a shahid, or this is the point of reference here. He said, هل كان فيها وثن من أوثان الجاهلية يعبد? Was there any wathan, any idol from the idols of the Jahiliyyah, of the idols of the people of ignorance, يعبد, being worshipped in that place? The Prophet ﷺ is asking him, this place called Buwana, was there an idol that is being or used to be worshipped by the people of Jahiliyyah, the people of ignorance? قالوا لا. They said no. Then the Prophet ﷺ said, قال فهل كان فيها عيد من أعيادهم? Was there in that place Eid? Eid is celebration, min a'yadihim, from their celebrations. And the word Eid in the Shar' is not just any celebration, because people, they can get together to celebrate for a newborn, for example, or celebrate someone, mashallah, finished the Qur'an. It's okay. But al-Eid comes from the same word, something that ya'ud, something keeps on coming back. So they set a date, whether it's on a yearly basis. This is the year that, or every year on a specific day, they would celebrate something, which is basically the holidays or the things that the people, every year it has a specific day. This Eid of this, Eid of that, the day of this, the day of that. Or monthly or even weekly, as long as it keeps on coming back. So this is what is called Eid, that people keep on going back and back to it over and over again. So are there any Eid? And the Eid is a special thing for any people that have cultures or religions. So that's why there is no Eid is permissible in the deen of Islam except Eid al-Fitr and Eid al-Adha. Any other Eid is not permissible. So the Prophet ﷺ, again, without going into so much details, he said, were there any Eid of their ayad, the ayad of the Jahiliyyah, which is based on shirk and worshipping other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, was there any of these ayad established in this place? قالوا لا. They said no, O Prophet of Allah. So then the Prophet ﷺ said, فقال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم أوفي بنذرك. Fulfill your nadhr. That means then fulfill your nadhr. No harm to fulfill your nadhr in that particular place. Then the hadith continues, فإنه لا وفاء لنذر في معصية الله. Principle that the Prophet ﷺ said, indeed there's no wafa, there's no fulfillment of any nadhr, of any vow, in the disobedience of Allah. So if someone made a vow that he would commit a sin, should he fulfill it? Of course not. It's not permissible for him to fulfill it. But he said he would do it. He made it an obligation upon him. Or he even swear by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that he would do it. Someone made it upon himself to commit a matter of shirk. This was done before, for example, he was a Muslim. Or to commit a sin, it's not permissible. What should a person do in that case? Before we continue with the hadith, he should not fulfill his nadhr, his vow, if it's sinful. But then he has to expiate for this nadhr the same way that he would expiate by taking an oath. If you take an oath and you're not able to fulfill it, then you expiate. How do you expiate for it? By feeding 10 people or clothing them, either way. Or if a person is not able to feed 10 people or to clothe them, then to fast 3 days. And freeing a slave is not existing nowadays. So this is the expiation of an oath. So that applies here. If a person is not able to fulfill the nadhr because if it's a sinful one, وَلَا فِي مَا لَا يَمْلِكُ ابْنُ آدَمَ. The other thing is no fulfillment of the nadhr or the vow if a person is not having the ability to do it, doesn't have the capacity to do it. Someone made a vow that he would free a slave. He made it upon himself, whether it's with condition or not, because the vow, the nadhr, either with a condition or not. A person would say, if I, again, pass my exam, I would free a slave. There's no slaves to free. But he made a vow. What should he do? He should then expiate for it as if he made an oath and he's not able to fulfill it. Or someone made a vow that a nadhr that he would fast 10 days if this happens. Or making a nadhr without a condition, just making a nadhr upon himself to fast 10 days. And again, as we said, this is not something that is good to be done. It's disliked, or even some said it's not permissible because you make things tight for you. So, but he said this, that means it becomes an obligation. He's not able to do it, he fell sick, a permanent sickness. So what should that person do? Expiate for the oath by feeding 10 people if you have the ability to do so. So the two conditions, as mentioned in the hadith, where the vow is not to be fulfilled, if it's in a matter of a sin, or a person does not have the capacity to do it. And this hadith is sound, rawahu Abu Dawud, wa isnaduhu ala shartihima. The isnad, the chain of narration of the hadith, is upon the conditions of Al-Bukhari and Muslim, and it's a sound hadith. Hafidh ibn Hajar authenticated and others. So what is again the hadith, the point of reference? And we should learn from the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. The ulama learned from it many great benefits, one of which is the questions of the Prophet ﷺ is very obvious. Why would he ask ﷺ? Was there, if the answer was yes, was there an idol of the people of Jahiliyyah is being worshipped there? If the people said yes, what would be the answer? Do not fulfill your nadhr. That's why he asked ﷺ, and the same thing with the Eid, with the matter of festivity or celebrations and things like this. So this is a clear ruling here, to stay away from slaughtering in a place where people are committing shirk there. A person might say, but in the slaughterhouse, people are slaughtering, whether it's by shooting the animal or not slaughtering in the proper way, or they're disbelievers and things like this. This is different. It's the act of slaughtering, they're not doing it in the proper way. But in a place where people are slaughtering for other than Allah, for some form of a cult, they sacrifice, or they say in the name of these individuals, or Jesus, for example, in the name of that person in the grave or whatever there is, then you don't slaughter in that place. Then you stay away. If someone says it to himself in a silent way, you don't know. But a place well known where people would sacrifice or do these matters of shirk is to stay away from it. It is not permissible. There is, many benefits that he mentions here. 11 points. The first one, the tafsir of لا تقم فيه أبدا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forbidding the Prophet ﷺ from praying in the Masjid Ad-Dirar. And of course the evidence of that, or that how it's used, because the Masjid has been built for matters of sin. The second one, أن المعصية قد تؤثر في الأرض وكذلك الطاعة. A great benefit here. The sin might affect the earth, and the same thing, the good deeds. The earth, it's the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So people would do something on a spot on the earth, matters of shirk, it affected that spot. To stay away from doing the same thing in the proper way, in the Tawheed way, because of the spot. And of course it's very obvious, as it's going to be mentioned, because this can be the ri'ah, can be a way for the shirk to be revived again. Because this used to be in the past. So if someone does it again and he slaughtered it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, people might revive to them what they used to do of matters of evil, and the shaitan has his ways in this. And the same thing with the acts of obedience to Allah affect the place. And there's a physical effect when it comes to sins and good deeds. It affects the places that people live in their homes, their countries, all kinds of things. And as we heard in the verses recited in Salatul Isha, how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala destroyed the people of Lut. Sin is committed, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala destroyed them. So the sin affects the land that a person lives in. And the same thing with matters of good deeds, the barakah and the blessings and so on. The third point, رد المسألة المشكلة إلى المسألة البينة ليزول الإشكال. Very important principle also. You have a mas'ala, a matter of the deen, that is mushkila or mushkal there, that means it's difficult or something that is not clear. So how can you deal with something that is not clear? Bring a mas'ala that is clear, and you would refer that ruling to what is clear, so that the matter becomes clear. And this is something that, of course, the people of knowledge, they use in matters that might be new or something that is complicated or things like this, to bring it to what is clear. What is clear is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forbade something, so that means it's forbidden, a person staying away from it, and to stay away from what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forbid, and therefore to make it in such a clear way. استفصال المفتي إذا احتاج إلى ذلك. The other benefit is that the mufti, the one that is going to give the answer, istifsal, he's asking to make the matter very clear. So that's why the Prophet ﷺ asked. And there are many examples of this. Is it permissible for a person to go to that place? Then he asked, what's wrong with that place? Is there sins in that place? To ask, to make the matter clear. And as a result of that, he would give the verdict. The next one, أن تخصيص البقعة بالنذر لا بأس به إذا خلا من المانع. It's okay to specify a spot to make a nadhr in a particular place, as long as there's no mawani', nothing would prevent the person from fulfilling that nadhr because of a sin again. So if someone, for example, made a nadhr that he would slaughter an animal in his hometown, that it has to be in his hometown, because the nadhr is according to what a person say. His statement becomes as if it's deen, because he made it as a deen upon himself. So, and of course the intentions has a great objective in there. The next one, المنع منه إذا كان فيه وثن من أوثان الجاهلية ولو بعد زواله. That how it's forbidden to fulfill that nadhr if there was an idol from the idols of the days of ignorance, even if it was removed. The place now doesn't have any idols being worshipped besides Allah, but because they used to do this in that spot, then it's not permissible to do it there. Because of, again, cutting all the leads that might lead for reviving matters of shirk. The next one, number 7, المنع منه إذا كان فيه عيد من أعيادهم ولو بعد زواله. The same thing if there's a Eid of their أعياد, festivities and so on, that they commit shirk in it, even if it get removed or it's not there anymore, to still stay away from doing any matters of ibadah or celebrations in these places. The next one, أنه لا يجوز الوفاء بما نذر في تلك البقعة لأنه نذر معصية. Whoever makes or fulfill the nadhr in that spot which is not permissible, then it becomes a sinful nadhr, so therefore it's not permissible to fulfill it and then to expiate. Number 9, الحذر من مشابهة المشركين في أعيادهم ولو لم يقصد. To be warned against imitating the mushrikeen, the disbelievers, in their a'yad, in their celebrations and holidays and so on, even if the person does not intend it to imitate them. When it comes to imitation, it doesn't have to have an intention. A person doesn't have to intend that he's imitating the disbelievers. He doesn't have to have this in his heart. Just the fact that he's doing something like them with regards to what's special for them. Not anything, just the things that is related to their religion or something that is unique to them. Then a person has to stay away from imitating them in what's unique in their way of life and things of that nature, even if he does not have the intention. So it does not need an intention. And that's the same thing with sins. Sins are sins. Even if a person doesn't have the intention to commit a sin, it's still a sin. Number 10, لا نذر في معصية. It's not permissible to make nadhr in a matter of sin. It has to be halal, of course. And when it comes to this nadhr, there's types of nadhr. There is a nadhr when it comes to the ta'ah, which is what's mentioned in the Qur'an and the Sunnah, as it will come in the next chapter, the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, مَنْ نَذَرَ أَنْ يُطِيعَ اللَّهَ فَلْيُطِعْهُ. Whoever made a nadhr, a vow, to be obedient to Allah, then let him obey Allah. So a person making a nadhr to fast or to make salah, then he has to fulfill it, of course. If it's a nadhr of ma'asiyah, sin, then it's not permissible, of course, to fulfill it. There is the third category, which is a nadhr al-mubah. A person making a nadhr that he would not wear this thobe whatsoever. This is nothing. But if a person make this upon himself, this is not how nadhr is. Nadhr is to make ibadah, to make ta'ah, to make an act of obedience to Allah. Not for these, permissible matters. But if a person make it upon himself, we're not talking about swearing by Allah. Different. If someone says, by Allah, I would never wear this, and it's something that is of no benefit, then he should wear it and expiate for his oath. But if he makes a nadhr, he would say, it's upon me, and whatever words that would mean that it's an obligation upon him, that he would never wear this, or he would never go to that place, has nothing to do with deen or ta'ah or ibadah, then in that case, it's not a nadhr, but still, according to what is Allahu A'lam, to the correct opinion, and to be away from differences of opinions, he still have to expiate for that nadhr. If he says it, even he's not making it as an oath, he still should expiate for this nadhr by feeding 10 people. If he's not able to do so, then to fast 3 days. And there is nadhr al-lijaj, they call it, or al-ghadab. Nadhr al-lijaj or al-ghadab is when someone is angry, so he makes a nadhr. Someone got him angry, then he did not swear. Swearing is something else. He says, upon me that I would never do this. Or I would do an act of ibadah or something like this. This is also, whether it's disliked or not permissible, but it has to be fulfilled. Or a person expiate. Especially with the one with the anger, some of the ulama, they say it's better to expiate and not to fulfill it. Because it's, again, he said it at the moment of anger, but he has to expiate for it. Or if he doesn't want to expiate, then fulfill the nadhr. The last one, لا نذر لابن آدم فيما لا يملك. No nadhr, no vow in something that the human being is not able to fulfill. If he's not able to fulfill, then there's no nadhr in this case. With this subject, someone might ask, people, for example, they purchase a place which was a church and they make it as a masjid. And this is one of the good deeds, actually, for a person to do so. So, it's not the same. And it's different than the matter of slaughtering. Why? Because a place that people would worship other than Allah, they completely look different than when the Muslimin takes over and they worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You can easily differentiate between a church and a masjid. If you enter a place, this is a masjid or a church? It's a masjid. So the action is completely different. As the ulama, they say, Tawheed versus shirk. But when it comes to slaughtering, this is what the essence of what mentioned in the chapter, as the ulama, they say. If you look from a distance, someone is doing it upon the Tawheed and someone is committing shirk. They're both doing the same act. The ones that are doing shirk, they're not dancing or doing some rituals. No, they're just slaughtering. But they're slaughtering for the idol. The idol doesn't have to be there, by the way. It's just some words that a person would say. And he is committing shirk. Versus someone else is doing it upon the Tawheed. So when al-mushabaha, when the similarity in the actions was there, and when someone look at them from a distance, they all look the same. So the forbiddance came here to avoid any, problems in people understanding things, or things becomes complex or not clear for people. So to avoid the shirk whatsoever. You see this point? So this is something that the ulama mentioned, which makes it very clear, the issue of the slaughtering. The next chapter, if you don't mind, it's just 2 verses and a short wordings of the hadith related to this. من الشرك النذر لغير الله. From الشرك is to make nadhr, vow, to other than Allah. So the previous one, slaughtering in a place for the sake of Allah, but in a place where people would slaughter for the sake of other than Allah, it's forbidden. Here, من الشرك النذر لغير الله. From الشرك is to make nadhr to other than Allah. The first ayah in Surah Al-Insan, يوفون بالنذر. The believers, one of their characteristics, they fulfill their nadhr. If they made a nadhr, if they made a vow, they would fulfill it. The next ayah, وَمَا أَنفَقْتُم مِّن نَفَقَةٍ أَوْ نَذَرْتُم مِّن نَذْرٍ فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ يَعْلَمُ. Surah Al-Baqarah, verse number 270. Whatever you spend of any nafaqah, small or big, أَوْ نَذَرْتُم مِّن نَذْر, or you made a vow, any vow, whether it's small or big, فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ يَعْلَمُ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows it. So again, with nadhr, even if you're alone in a room and you said words of nadhr, then it's upon you. But you have to say it with speech. You have to say words. Cannot be intentions in the heart. So if someone alone, no one is witnessing, and he says upon himself that he would do this, then it's a nadhr. So some of these types of things between a person and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is binding, and the same thing with human beings to a human being. In the past few days we were talking about the waqf, endowment. Al-waqf, when you give something as an endowment, a building, for example, apartment building, that you would give it and not to be sold. It's going to be there, and the benefits from it, renting it, will go to whatever specific directions that you want to specify for poor people, for this and that. It doesn't matter. But if a person says it, that he makes this place waqf, or whatever words that would give that meaning, then it's a binding contract, and it's forever, cannot be changed. He cannot come the next day and says, I'm sorry, I took this back. Too late. If he says it, it's gone. It's like a masjid. Masjid is waqf. This place is waqf. Meaning, can anybody sell that place? No, of course not, right? And some places where they would have to have an individual, right, to have the ownership of the place with an individual's name. This is the legality of things. So you find a masjid under the name of a person, but it's waqf, right? That means it's not permissible for that person to sell it. Legally wise, he can do this, but it's haram, of course. It's haram to sell a masjid. It's waqf. Unless it's a matter of necessity, this is a different situation. So anyway, so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows it. So the words that a person says becomes then obligatory upon him. The only hadith mentioned here, وفي الصحيح عن عائشة رضي الله عنها أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال من نذر أن يطيع الله فليطيعه ومن نذر أن يعصي الله فلا يعصه. Very clear. من نذر, whoever made a nadhr, a vow, أن يطيع Allah, that he would obey Allah. How can a person make a nadhr with the obedience of Allah? I will fast, I will make a salah, I will give charity, something of matters of obedience to Allah. Then فليطيعه, then he should obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and fulfill his nadhr, and it's an obligation upon him if he does this. وَمَنْ نَذَرَ أَنْ يَعْصِ اللَّهِ, and whoever make a vow that he will disobey Allah, then فَلَا يَعْصِهِ, he should not disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So what should he do? He should expiate for the nadhr, which brings this clear principle and foundation in the deen that never changes whatsoever. لا طاعة لمخلوق في معصية الخالق, no obedience for any makhluk, for anyone, in the disobedience of Allah. So whether yourself, you made it upon yourself to commit a sin, never do this. If you swear by Allah that you will commit a sin, never to do it, but expiate for the oath that you took. If you promised someone, if you wrote a contract, and the contract in it that you would commit a sin, and we know that al-Muslimun, the Muslims, they should fulfill their covenants. This is haram. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu awfu bil uqud. Or you will believe, fulfill the contracts. It's haram to break a contract that you signed it and you agreed to it. But there was a condition there that is sinful. Then it's not permissible to fulfill it. Then take upon yourself the losses and things like this. Unless it's a necessity again, then you ask a major scholar to get yourself out of it. But it's haram to fulfill something that has a sinful act or something that is clearly haram. So this is, a condition or a principle. And the same thing, no excuse in a sin. There's nothing that would be in the Sharia would say it's okay to commit a sin, unless it's a life and death situation. Like, when is it permissible to eat pork, for example, to save your life? To the best of your ability, if you don't eat this, you will die. Then eat what is only necessary for you to keep yourself alive. Other than that, it's not permissible. This is with sins. And if it makes your life difficult, if you don't commit a sin, be patient. But you're still able to live. You're not as rich as you want to be, but you're poor. It's okay. But you're able to live. You have a place to live in. You have food and drinks, things of that nature. The masail is only 3. The first one, wujubu al-wafa'i bin-nadhr. It's an obligation to fulfill the nadhr. So now we learned subject in the fiqh with regards to a nadhr. We have to fulfill the nadhr, and you should not make nadhr. So be at the ease of not making nadhr. Some people think that this is the way to get something done. And the Prophet ﷺ mentioned that, إِنَّمَا يُسْتَخْرَجُ, meaning مِنَ النَّذْرِ مِنَ الْبَخِيلِ, بِالنَّذْرِ مِنَ الْبَخِيلِ. The greedy one, the Prophet ﷺ, he said, the greedy one, with the nadhr, you get extracted from him something. He's greedy, he's not giving. So he would have to give only if he makes a nadhr, if he makes a vow. So he falls sick, for example, so the only way that he would give is that he would make a nadhr. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make him cure, he will give this and this for the sake of Allah. Why don't you give for the sake of Allah when you're not sick? Or if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave you cure, you don't have to make it as a condition. Just give for the sake of Allah. Do things and you get rewards for it. You don't have to make a nadhr. So stay away from it, but if you made a nadhr, then it's an obligation to fulfill it. Number 2, إذا ثبت كونه عبادة لله فصرفه إلى غيره شرك. If the nadhr was ibadah to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then making this ibadah to other than Allah is, of course, shirk. If someone makes the ibadah to other than Allah, if someone makes a nadhr to make a sujood to a grave, for example, because he did not know or people told him that this is something is okay, then he's not to fulfill it, of course, because this is shirk. الثالثة أن نذر المعصية لا يجوز الوفاء به. To make nadhr with al-ma'siyah, with matters of sins, is not permissible, and a person should not do it. And again, to add to this, that with expiation of the sin. So this is the end of this chapter. And as you see, with these matters of ilm or knowledge, to safeguard the foundation of our deen and to learn how to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's why the subject of the Tawheed and the Aqidah, where we need to keep knowing it and teaching it and to repeat it, because that's the most important thing in our life. And that's why the people of Ahl Sunnah, as Shaykh Islam Taymiyyah rahimahullah, he said, hum a'lam al-khalq bil-haq, they are the most knowledgeable people of the truth, and وَأَرْحَمُ الْخَلْقِ وَأَرْحَمُ النَّاسِ بِالْخَلْقِ, and they are the most merciful towards people. They have mercy towards people. And this is one of the characteristics, one of the signs of the people of Ahl Sunnah, that they learn the deen and they educate themselves with regards to the haqq and the truth, and they have the concern towards others. They're not there to be, mean to others, but rather they have mercy in their hearts towards others. How can they be saved from the punishment of Allah, and how can they know the truth so that they are upon it? So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us prevent, inshallah. Are you sure? I don't want to keep you late. The next chapter, inshallah. باب من الشرك الاستعاذة بغير الله. And by the way, these chapters, as you see, there's a subject in the Shara' even with the issue of sadd al-dhara'i, or to cut the leads to sins. Part of it, or a major part of it, is within the deen itself. Because sometimes it might be something that is not with a direct evidence in the Qur'an and the Sunnah. The meanings of which is, these things are forbidden for what reason? To protect the person from falling, or the wisdom behind it, to protect the person from falling into the major shirk, right? So what leads to it is forbidden. The same thing, zina is forbidden. Adultery is forbidden. This is a major sin. And what the things that leads to it, you would find it also forbidden. So that's why you're commanded to lower the gaze, not to be alone with a man and a woman alone, and not touching and things of that nature, so that the person is protected. It doesn't mean that if it's forbidden for that reason, that means if I do these small sins, it's okay as long as it doesn't lead to the other one. No, because it's forbidden in itself. There's text, there's wahi, there's Qur'an and Sunnah, the Prophet ﷺ, that forbids these sins that would lead, whether it leads or it doesn't lead, it's still forbidden. And therefore, sometimes, if a person, the only way for him to commit a specific sin, and he knows himself, a specific individual, once he sees him, the sin becomes very easy for him. So that means do not see that person. You know yourself. You know your weakness. So we have to have that understanding of our own selves, because every time you see that person, then things falls apart. So that means you have to protect yourself. So it teaches us that whatever is forbidden, we have to make barriers between us and what's forbidden to protect our hearts and to protect our honor and dignity. As the Prophet ﷺ said also in the halal and the haram hadith. So from الشرك الاستعاذة بغير الله. From matters of shirk is to make isti'adha, to say أعوذ بغير الله, by other than Allah. And الاستعاذة is to seek refuge in someone other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is shirk. الاستعاذة, when we say أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم, this isti'adha is an act of ibadah, and it's only to be done to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it's not as it means linguistically, you seek refuge in someone in a matter where a human being is able to do. That's something else. But the word a'udhu or al-isti'adha is only to Allah, in the things that only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can do. So for example, if someone is having in the middle of the ocean, for example, and they're seeking help from the people to come and save them, that's fine. You're not making shirk or anything. You're asking help from human beings where the human beings can do that. But if someone asks a human being something that the human beings have no capacity to do it because it's not something for them. For example, someone would be in his room or in his house, and a thief enters in the house. And he says, "Oh, so-and-so, that righteous guy in the grave, help me." This guy is not with him. If he calls the police, that's fine. This is permissible, of course. He runs away, he takes the means. All of that is good. But some crazy people, they would say, "Oh, Badawi, help me," or Jilani, help me, or someone, or even, "Oh, Prophet of Allah, help me." If he says, "Oh, Allah, help me," perfect, mashallah. So this comes into the level or this category of shirk, because he's calling other than Allah in the ways that these individuals, these creation of Allah, has no means or capacity or any validity whatsoever. So al-isti'adha is exclusive to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The word al-isti'adha, seeking refuge in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from all kinds of sorts of evil. So al-isti'adha بغير الله شرك. وقول الله تعالى وأنه كان رجال من الإنس يعوذون برجال من الجن فزادوهم رهقا. That some men of the human beings, they used to يعوذون. The word يعوذون, that means they seek refuge from the jinn. So فزادوهم رهقا, the jinn increased their miseries. And they seek refuge in the jinn by disbelieving in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And they would seek refuge in the jinn to commit evil and things of that nature. So they made this al-isti'adha, and the Arabs used to, for example, when they travel in the times of Jahiliyyah, if they come down to rest during the night, they would have to give allegiance to the leader of the jinn of that place in the desert. So they would slaughter an animal, or they would say words that they're seeking refuge in the jinn or in the leader of the jinn, so that nothing would harm them. Right? This is all shirk, of course, and it's a very obvious thing. The next, which is the hadith, وعن خولة بنت حكيم رضي الله عنها قالت سمعت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يقول من نزل منزلا فقال أعوذ بكلمات الله التامات من شر ما خلق لم يضره شيء حتى يرحل من منزله ذلك. And the hadith is reported by Imam Muslim, which means من نزل منزلا, whoever comes down in a place, and usually it's referred to when you're traveling. So you're going to a place and you نزلت منزلا, that means you came down from your camel, you came down from the plane, you came down from the train, and now you're settled in a place, a town, or people would, they stop in rest areas, and used to be in the past openness in the desert, in the jungle, whatever there is. So it doesn't have to be an open place, any place. You go to a strange place to you, and a person, if he says, أعوذ بكلمات الله التامات, I seek refuge in Allah, I seek refuge in the words of Allah, in the perfect words of Allah, min sharri ma khalaq, from the evil of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created. If he says this, and we'll talk about what kalimatullah. If he says, أعوذ بكلمات الله التامات, I seek refuge in the perfect and complete words of Allah, from the evil of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created. If he says this, لم يضره شيء, nothing will harm him, حتى يرحل من منزله ذلك, till he leaves from that place where he settled in, or he came down when he was traveling. So why this hadith is mentioned here is أعوذ بكلمات الله التامات, I seek refuge in the perfect words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So what does that mean? Seeking refuge in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in the kalimat of Allah, His names and attributes, and which is basically the kalimat of Allah. You're seeking refuge in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with His names and attributes. And this is the perfect names and attributes of Allah. The Qur'an is one of the attributes of Allah, from the evil of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created. So that means if a person seeks refuge in other than Allah, then he committed shirk. Because the ibadah, if it's done, the act of worship, it's done to other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's associating partners with Allah. The benefits here, 5 points. The first one, tafsirul ayah, the tafsir of the ayah, how the human beings, some of them would seek refuge in the jinn. And this ayah, by the way, in Surah Al-Jinn, it's after stating that they are mushrikeen, right? So this is one of the characteristics of the mushrikeen. So this is a matter of shirk. The second thing, كونه من الشرك, that this is from a shirk, to seek refuge in the jinn. And some people till today, they do the same. Those who deal with jinn, this is all forms of shirk. And when it comes to sihr, which is prevalent and it's present, the sihr is a sahir kafir. A sahir is a disbeliever. The sorcerer. Why? Because he would never commit or do acts of sihr, sorcery, unless he disbelieves in Allah. The jinn would not help him unless he would curse Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or do evil actions, that basically it's all kufr, disbelief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The third one, al-istidlalu ala dhalika bil-hadith, the evidence as mentioned in the hadith, لأن العلماء استدلوا به على أن كلمات الله غير مخلوقة قالوا لأن الاستعاذة بالمخلوق شرك. And this is a beautiful benefit here. The hadith is أعوذ بكلمات الله, I seek refuge in the words of Allah, the perfect words of Allah. The words of Allah, are they creation of Allah, or they are an attribute of Allah? Attribute of Allah. Kalimatullah غير مخلوقة. This is an important matter of aqidah, matter of belief. The Qur'an is kalamullah, is the speech of Allah, is not makhluk, is not creation of Allah. So the ulama, they said, since you say أعوذ بكلمات الله, which is the words of Allah, which is not a creation of Allah, therefore to seek refuge in the makhluk, in the creation of Allah, is shirk. So this is anything that is makhluk, you don't seek refuge in the makhluk from whatever evil that you fear. And kalimatullah is not makhluk, it's the words of Allah. Number 4, فضيلة هذا الدعاء مع اختصاره. The virtue of this dua, even though it's short. And that's why one of the benefits of what we're learning is to memorize this dua. أعوذ بكلمات الله التامات من شر ما خلق. Say أعوذ بكلمات الله التامات من شر ما خلق. أعوذ بكلمات الله التامات من شر ما خلق. We're saying that to memorize it, not to seek blessings by saying it, but just to memorize it. So, and it's something to be said 3 times in the evening. It's from the adhkar of the Prophet ﷺ taught his ummah to say it. You don't have to be a traveler. Every evening to say it 3 times. أعوذ بكلمات الله التامات من شر ما خلق. If a person says it, nothing will harm him, inshallah ta'ala. The last point, أن كون الشيء يحصل به منفعة دنيوية من كف شر أو جلب نفع لا يدل على أنه ليس من الشرك. It's also a beautiful benefit here, which basically means something that you would get a worldly benefit from it, whether it's to push away harm or evil or to bring benefit, does not mean necessarily that this is not shirk. So if someone do something and he benefits as a result of this, does that mean that what he did is good? Meaning, does the end justify the means? No. This is not in the deen of Allah. The end has to be according to the deen, and the means has to be according to the deen. So if someone benefits from the jinn, does that make it permissible? Of course not. If someone benefits from selling drugs, does that make selling drugs permissible because he makes a lot of money? Of course not. So things are not according to the benefits. Things is according to how being obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the same thing with the outcome of one's actions. Like, for example, a brother, he was saying that because he was staying away from a specific matter of haram, he's being poor, right? This is what he's explaining according to his situation. Of course, Allah knows best how many evil has been pushed away from him, but his colleagues or whatever, they become so rich now, but he's poor. The covenant between us and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not about benefiting ourselves in this dunya. If someone continues to be poor because he's obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this by itself is a karama, is a great honor and a favor from Allah that he's steadfast upon the deen of Allah till he dies on that state. Because afterwards, if the reward is saved for him, then he would never wish otherwise, because he returns to the mercy of Allah. But it's by the mercy of Allah, because we're weak. Whoever is obedient to Allah, he would see the effect of that in his heart, in his life, and he would see the beauty of it in his heart. And people might look at him from a distance that, oh, this poor man is in a bad situation, but what's in his heart is such a feel of tranquility and benefits that is far more than anything or any wealth on the face of earth. So this is the last one about the benefits, is not necessarily related to things to be valid or to things to be not in the state of shirk. So, and one chapter after the other, so we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect us from all matters of shirk and associating partners with Allah, and to give us the benefiting knowledge and the righteous actions that is as a result of that, inshallah. Any questions or anything that is not clear? You mean sin? Huh? But what's the word that you said at the end? Sensical? What does that mean? What does that mean?
I'm making nothing, I'm never going to wear this shirt again. Or if someone says, Wallahi, I'm never going to wear this shirt again. Okay. Is it the same thing?
Okay, so you said the question said I don't have to repeat it. Say the question.
So you mentioned if someone makes a nether of something which is, you said mubah, which is, let's say it's something not ibadah, nothing, right. And you said the ulama said it's better to not fulfill the nether but make a kafara for that nether. Does the same apply for someone who makes a halaf, instead of a nether, they swear by Allah?
Right. If someone swears by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that he would never wear this shirt, or he would never enter this house of his friend, or whatever there is, there's a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that whoever does something like this, then فَلْيَأْتِ الَّذِي وَخَيْرٌ من حلف على يمين فرأى خيرا منه. Whoever swears upon, make an oath upon something, and he finds something else better than it. Not that he made an oath to commit a sin, as mentioned here. He finds that what he made an oath upon is not the best choice. Something else is better for him. Then he should do what is khair, what is good, and expiate for his oath. So if he swears by Allah that he would never wear this thing, and this thing is permissible, nothing wrong with it, either he can give it to a poor person, that's fine. But if it's something that would cause difficulties for him, or it's best that he would wear it, then he should wear it and expiate for the oath.
And do you get a sin if even if you make a kafara, or is it?
No, if a person makes the kafara, there's no sin and he regrets what he did. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, لا تجعلوا الله عرضة لأيمانكم أن تبروا وتصلحوا بين. Do not make your ayman prevent you from doing good and righteousness to others. Some people say he would never enter the house of his sister anymore because her husband said this to him. So what is this? No, expiate for your sin and go visit your sister because it's not permissible to do that.
حفظ الله لك يا شيخنا. أحسن الله إليك. My question is also based on another, because after watching a video by a da'i, famous da'i here in the United States, Sheikh Uthman, concerning the animal meat, and we discussed this with you last week, I believe. And barakallahu fiqh, that you clarified it beautifully, and you added something even more additional, which even I, that I consider myself like a student of fiqh, basic fiqh, I didn't know. And I thank our Sheikhna Faisal, barakallahu fihi, as well, for his knowledge. So I, after watching the video that, the animals that is stunned, that is nailed, that is electrocuted, that it is shot, and I don't want to make this, bigger than what it was before. Basically, he said that the animals that are killed in this way, of course, is mayat, and you mentioned it, and I thank you for that. And so I made another after that, a strong nadar, that I swore by Allah that wallahi I am not going to eat non-zabiha meat after this. Time after that, I became very sick because, of course, I am not married. I have no time to cook when I come home from work, especially going to the Muslim store and buying, zabiha meat. And so I got sick. So my question is, after my recovery, I had no choice but to eat the non-zabiha meat. So my question is, concerning the nadar that I have made by swearing by Allah, should I do kafara and based on that, what you explained?
There are two things. The first one is the subject of the nadr. What exactly you said? Do you remember the words that you said?
I said, I swear by Allah that I will never eat non-zabiha meat anymore.
So this is not nadr. This is you swear by Allah that you would never eat. You made halif, you made qasam that you would never eat the meat. So this is not nadr. This is making an oath or swearing by Allah that you would never eat a specific meat. In that case, if you ate, right, then you have to expiate for that halif or this qasam that you made, which is feeding 10 people or clothing them. If you don't have the financial ability, then you fast 3 days. Then the second subject, which is related to this, you should never ever eat non-dhabiha meat. So you should continue to be upon this and never do it again. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy.
Oh. Jazakallah khair.
Can you just kind of explain the difference between halaf, like saying wallahi I'm swearing by Allah, and a nadhr, like
No.
what exactly, because it's kind of confusing.
Right. Al-halif is all differences in the words. The halif, and that's why the nadhr is not by intentions, it's by what the person says. So a nadhr is not swearing by Allah. He's just saying, if, say, for example, someone, his name is Ahmad, says, alayya, upon me, for example, siyam, thalathat ayyam, I would say, upon me is to fast 3 days, whether it's if this happens or without saying if something happens. That means it's an obligation upon him. That means he has to do it. And al-halif is that a person would say, wallahi, by Allah, that I would fast 3 days, for example. He still have to do it. But the difference is this is swearing by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala versus the other one, which is a nadhr, and the nadhr has to be fulfilled, and the halif also has to be fulfilled. But with the nadhr, if someone, say for example, he made a nadhr to make ta'ah. The nadhr is general in matters of ta'ah, to fast 3 days. There's no such a thing that he finds something else better than what he made as a nadhr. He has to fulfill the nadhr. But for swearing, person can swear to make a ibadah or can swear to do something else. He can swear by Allah that he will go to the store now. It's not a nadhr because you don't make a nadhr that it's upon me to go to the store. Nadhr is in the ta'ah and the acts of obedience to Allah. But halif is much general. And if he makes a halif like that and he finds that, no, it's not a good idea to go to the store now. Not that it's matter of life and death. No, he changed his mind. Should he then change his mind even though he swear by Allah because there's something better for him in that case? Yes, but he has to expiate for the halif, and he should avoid, of course, being at ease with it. So this is one of the major differences between both.
Can I ask a quick follow-up? So for the nadar, can you make a nadar without the intention of it? Or do you have to have the intention and the wording has to be in place?
The intention doesn't have to be there. Unless a person is just insane or he lost his mind and he's saying things that he's not responsible for what he says. But if a person knows what he's saying, it doesn't have to have an intention. That means, but again, the language can be different, right? Whatever statement that he made, he's making it an obligation upon him to do an act of ibadah or act of obedience to Allah. He's obligating this upon himself. Not that you say, inshallah, I will fast 3 days. That's not nadr. It depends also how the person would say it and how the intentions is in it. But a nadr is clear words. Alayya, upon me, it's an obligation upon me. For a person I make a nadr, which is very explicit. So it has to be very clear that it's an obligation upon him, not that he wants to do something good.
Jazakallah khair.
Jazakallah khair. With Ramadan coming up, I did have a question regarding chapter 11.9, resembling the polytheists and their celebrations. So, to what extent is it considered resembling the polytheists if for Ramadan we decorate our houses with like lights or whatever it may be, signs that say Ramadan, whatever, the Mubarak. And do the Christians and the Yahud, do they have a monopoly on like what it means to decorate? Like does that belong to them? Jazakallah khair.
For me to talk about the subject, of course, we have to refer to the people of knowledge with that specific thing. But it's for sure, it is not the ways of the Muslims that they would do these types of decorations because of some great season is coming of ibadah. This was never known to be the way of the early generations of Islam and things like this, and it's very clear that they got it from others. And we have to be careful to something. I'm not forbidding what Allah permitted, but the more people are concerned of the zina and the decoration, the less they would have the effect of what they're doing of the ibadah in their hearts. Same thing with the masajid. The Prophet ﷺ said, "Ma umirtu bitashid al-masajid." I was never commanded to build the masajid in such a beautiful and decorative way. And the masjid of the Prophet ﷺ was just something to protect them from the rain, and no painting and no decorations, anything of that nature. And they had the best khushu' and the best devotion and the best hearts were present in these places. So the more there is these distractions, the more it takes away. So people should avoid this completely and anything that would imitate the disbelievers in this. But as far as like some things that people might do in their homes as to have the identity of the Muslims or the children in Ramadan and things like this, this is again, Allah knows best. I have to check what the ulama mentioned about this when it comes to that. But it's imitation of the decoration, and the same, like for example, the way people do at Christmas, they would do it for Ramadan. That's not permissible like this, of course.
So I have a question concerning the matters of I'll load up chapter 11, and it says to not slaughter in places where they commit shirk, right? So I live in a Christian household, unfortunately, and they have unfortunately, idols and statues of Jesus, peace be upon him. And I was wondering if, let's say, for example, we were to remove all these idols, and inshallah ta'ala, it becomes a Muslim household. Is it permissible to slaughter in that house then?
According to that question, of course, yes. That what's forbidden here, if they were slaughtering in this place for Jesus, peace be upon him. If they were using that place as sacrifice, to sacrifice as a religious sacrifice for other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is what is forbidden. But the fact that they were having idols and they were doing things that is shirk and things like this, and then these things changed everything can be done there. It's actually it's a good deed for things to change to be a places of ibadah and things like this. And as mentioned, the ibadah of the Muslims will be completely different than what they used to do before. So the physical action is different. What's forbidden is if you would do something similar to what they were doing, and a person from a helicopter and on top, he would see that you're doing the same thing. But one is doing it right and one is not doing it right. This is where the resemblance comes in place, which in this case it doesn't.
Jazakallah khair.
You mentioned like how people try to avoid obviously try to avoid the major sins, but the minor sins that lead into those major sins, they think that they're free to do. Like when someone just sticks continuously doing like these minor sins, even though they know it's wrong, do they start to fall into arrogance or like no?
Barakallahu feek. The issue of the minor sins and the major sins. Major sins are the sins that usually associated with a clear punishment or warning that is associated with it. So the minor sins, to say that it's a minor sin, that means it's stated clearly in the Qur'an or in the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ that it's forbidden. So that means we have to stay away from it. And for someone to belittle a minor sin in one's heart, this attitude is a major sin, because a sin is a sin. And another thing is when someone is committing a minor sin, but he is having israr or persistency in committing it, no plans to repent. This israr is a major sin. This persistency in itself is a major sin. So therefore, the minor sins, if someone slipped, and did commit a sin and immediately repents to Allah, or the things that is not without persistency, the 5 daily salah expiates and things of that nature. And that's why it's a dangerous thing for a person to be upon the minor sin, and a person should repent to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and take the means with the acts of ibadah and the right environment and so on. But something that is very important to be mentioned, and first of all, you said, can that lead to arrogance? Yes, if a person in his heart, what's wrong with a minor sin? It's belittling it, and using his own reason that there's nothing wrong with it or something like this. This can be a disease in the heart, which is arrogance. But we have to be clear also, as this is mentioned, to make sure that we put things in perspective to bring what is benefiting and to push away what is harmful. The ulama, one of the reasons why they mention these categories, so that we don't fall into the ways of shaitan that he try to take people even outside the fold of Islam. Someone, a new Muslim, for example, right? And he says, I have these sins, and it's very difficult for him to repent to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or to leave these sins. Someone tell him this is haram, this is sinful. If he understands from this that he is not a Muslim, if he commits these sins, that's why these categories comes in place. That means he's still a Muslim, even though he commits sins, even if it's major sins. It's not to belittle the sins, but we're talking about matters of Islam versus disbelief. A Muslim committing major sins, and he's persistently committing it, and no plans to repent to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from it. He's still a Muslim. He's not a disbeliever. He's a sinful Muslim, yes, and so on. But it is not valid then for a person to say, well, that's too difficult for me. Let me leave the religion of Islam. That means you're going to go worship idols after Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saved you from a shirk. So it's to work on yourself, to love matters of obedience to Allah and to seek the means and so on, but never to allow this as a way of shaitan to give up on the mercy of Allah or to quit repenting or things of that nature. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy for all of us.
Assalamu alaikum. Barakallahu feek. I had a couple questions. I had 2 questions about what we were talking about. One was pertaining to the vow. There is a hadith about the Sahabi where he didn't sleep with his wife and he was praying tahajjud every day and finishing the Qur'an every day. And then the Prophet ﷺ gave him the advice. And then at the end, when he got older, he said that I should have listened to the Prophet ﷺ. Was this Sahabi, did he make another?
No, this is Abdullah ibn Amr ibn al-As, radiallahu anhuma. He did not make another, but there's 2 different things. Abdullah ibn Umar, but then Abdullah ibn Amr ibn al-As is the one that was making fasting. He was fasting a lot, and he asked the Prophet ﷺ about fasting. the Prophet ﷺ, he said, fast 1 day a month. He said, I can do more than that. He said, fast 3 days every month. He said, I can do more than that. He said, fast every Monday and Thursdays. He said, I can do more than that. He said, fast every other day. And the Prophet ﷺ forbade him of doing more than that as far as the optional fasting. So then at the end, when he became old, he said, I wish I took the advice of the Prophet ﷺ, because the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, this is not a nadhr, but they took it upon themselves without a nadhr, that whatever actions that they were doing, even if it's an optional act of worship, at the time when the Prophet ﷺ died, that they would continue to do it till they die. Why? Because they knew that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was pleased with them, because the Prophet ﷺ was among them. But after the Prophet ﷺ died, to make sure that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is pleased with them till they die, they kept the same actions without changing anything, even if it's optional. That's what he meant. And when he got old, radiallahu anhu, he could not fast every other day. It was said that he would fast multiple days, one after the other, and then break his fast for other days. So that at the end, the entire year is half fasting and half is not fasting. So that the end result is the same. And it was tiring for him. That's why he said, I wish I took the advice of the Prophet ﷺ when he said that to me.
Jazakallah khair. And the other question is, since we were talking about the Prophet ﷺ asking the Sahaba, when you made the vow to slaughter, was there idols here? And he said no. Was there celebrations here? He said no. Well, now what if I tell this to somebody and they tell me, how about the Kaaba, where there used to be idols there? How do I reply to them?
Right. As we said, it's about slaughtering, that the actions are the same. The Kaaba had 360 something idols around the Kaaba. And Ibrahim alayhi salam is the one that built the Kaaba. And the mushrikeen were associating partners with Allah with these idols. The Prophet alayhi salam came and he destroyed these idols, removed them, and then the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is done in the Kaaba. So this was pertaining to an act as the dhabh specifically, or anything that might come up as the same way, where again from a distance people are doing the same physical action, in which the kuffar, they were doing completely something else. And then it became upon the Tawheed. And the example of that again, as we said, there's a place where people worshipping idols in it, and then this place is purchased by the Muslimin. So they remove these idols and they worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Their worship is completely different than the worship of those who are worshipping idols. But the slaughter is the same action. And that's why it was forbidden.
Jazakallah khair. Sorry for asking too many questions. I have like 2 more questions. Sorry about that. Barakallahu feek. I heard something ajib today. I was listening, and this brother was saying that there's he said majority of the scholars, which I don't know what he's talking about, but he said that majority of the scholars are saying that the Prophet ﷺ's father and mother are not going to the hellfire, and the dalil that he used was that in the hadith, when the person asked him about his father, where's my father, he's saying that the word used, I think it was Abba or something, he's saying that could also mean uncle. And then he was saying for the mother that that in the Qur'an it says that if the message didn't come to them, I don't want to say the Qur'an ayat wrong. So he's saying, so when I heard that, I was a little bit confused, because he said the Jamhur said that. So I was wondering, what does he mean by Jamhur?
First of all, this is wrong. This is all, it's a lie and it's not true. But it's a subject that even as the ulama of Ahlul Sunnah, they say, it's not a subject that we talk about a lot. Meaning, I'm not talking about your question, I'm talking about in general, because it hurts a believer that this is the case of the fathers of the Prophet ﷺ. But that's the qadr of Allah. And that's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decreed. But yes, is according to, we only follow the text. We follow the wahy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And for people to twist the words so much to reach something that they decide before the text, that's one of the major differences between Ahl Sunnah and the people of Al-Bid'ah. People of Ahl Sunnah, they don't put principles and then they look into the evidences to make sure that it fits these principles or the decisions that they already made. The people of Al-Bid'ah, they make decisions first. They say, no way this is going to be the case. So then when the evidences come, oh no, it actually doesn't mean this. Istawa is not istawa, it's istawla. Because they made a decision already before that. So they would twist the nusus. So what is the meaning of abi? There's no such, yes, if the Arabs sometimes use it in some strange context, it doesn't mean that this is, something like this, the Prophet ﷺ would use ambiguous statements. So, but again, what's the action that is built upon this? Nothing. It's just something that we say, even though it's not something that is pleasant to talk about it a lot, but this is something that people have no evidence to it.
Barakallahu feek. I just have one more question. Sorry about that. Afwan. The same person, he said that when it comes to a da'if hadith, that when it comes to virtues, that we take them as the hadith of Musa alayhi salam when he's asking Allah Azza wa Jalla to teach him something, and he says that if you would put the 7 heavens and the 7 earths besides me and it on one side of the scale, and La ilaha illallah on the other side, La ilaha illallah would outweigh it. So then he tried to say that this can also mean that when someone, the hadith about reading Surah Waqiyah and Surah Yasin, he's saying that we can accept this as well. And when I said that, I thought that this is ibadah, though, to say that, wouldn't that be a bid'ah?
Now, the subject of the weak hadith. First of all, weak hadith to be used in matters of aqidah, of course, this is not permissible. In matters of ahkam rulings, also, it does not, no building is to be, or no actions is to be built upon a weak hadith when it comes to ahkam or rulings or actions. The only part or the only subject that the ulama had 2 differences of opinions in Fadail A'mal, in the virtues, the actions that has the virtue of actions. So a hadith that talks about the virtue of praying Salatul Fajr in the Masjid, and it's weak. So some ulama, they said it's not permissible to use it. And the other type of ulama, they said it's permissible with conditions. So if we take the other opinion, it's okay to use it, but with the conditions. What are the conditions? The first one, that the hadith is not very weak, so it's not like something that is fabricated. So we have to know the level of the weakness of it. The second condition is that it's already in its subject, there is authentic hadith that gives the same meaning. So we already have a hadith that talks about the virtue of praying Salatul Fajr in the Masjid, so it does not add any action. And the third thing is that a person should not believe that the Prophet ﷺ said it, because it's weak. So he should not act upon that as if he's believing that the Prophet ﷺ said it. So if these 3 conditions are applied, then the hadith that talks about Fadail A'mal, according to some, it's okay. And the other thing is that when the ulama mention in their books, for example, weak hadith, major a'imma of the deen, even including it and so on, even in matters of fiqh, like in Bulugh al-Maram and others, Al-Hafidh ibn Hajar would have a hadith in there, and it's fiqh matters and it's weak hadith. This is to understand the ways of the ulama, it's important. Because if he made the book only a hadith, one of the reasons is that he would use a weak hadith instead of saying something. So the hadith, its meanings is correct. But instead of saying his words, he would put a hadith that is weak, then instead of saying his words. But the outcome is the same. Or maybe the hadith might be weak and they would still preserve it. Maybe someone else would authenticate it. So many reasons the ulama would include the weak hadith. But to say that when it comes to Surah Al-Waqi'ah, for example, if the hadith is weak and that an action is built as a result of that, that means we don't act upon a hadith that is weak. But to add to this, also one thing, if someone, he likes to recite Surah Al-Waqi'ah every day, go ahead and do so. No problem whatsoever in reciting Surah Al-Waqi'ah every day. But if you apply the 3 conditions, don't believe that the Prophet ﷺ said that, and therefore you just do it because you love the surah. So whether it's Surah Al-Waqi'ah or Surah Al-Zumar or Surah Al-Jathiyah, and you keep on reciting it every day, it's not bid'ah, it's a good thing. Unless you prescribe it to others. If you read Surah Al-Jathiyah every day, you will get this. Where did you come up with this? This is a matter of unseen.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakallahu khair, Sheikh, for your time. I have a question regarding slaughtering. Many Muslims on Eid al-Adha, they go to farms where animals are slaughtered for other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So regarding this, is this permissible, even if it's out of dhurura, out of necessity?
MashaAllah, this is a good question. If people are slaughtering animals for other than Allah, that means they are declaring the name of other than Allah, or they're just slaughtering. You know, for the most part, for example, here people, they just slaughter the animals. The slaughterhouse or in a place, they just slaughter the animals. They don't say Bismillah, they don't do nothing, they just want to eat. They just want meat. But if in that place the people are sacrificing as a religious sacrifice, then it's not permissible to slaughter in the same place.
بارك الله فيك.
تفضل.
أحسن الله عليكم. Is there a particular sheikh's sharh you're using for the book?
I use the normally حاشية كتاب التوحيد because it's very precise by Sheikh Abdul Rahman ibn al-Qasim. But there, subhanAllah, this book is served like nothing else. So all the major ulama, they explained it, and their lectures are there, and it's even written in books. So if you just search of Sharh Kitab At-Tawheed, all the major ulama, Sheikh Ibn Baz, Sheikh Ibn Uthaymeen, and other ulama, and the present ones, they have it. One of the very beautiful, precise explanations is by Sheikh Al-Usaymi Hafidhahullah, where he precisely mentioned the point of reference only, which is very important when studying a book like this, not to expand so much. So this is all good, mashallah. And Fath al-Majid is one of the beautiful books by Sheikh Muhammad Hassan Ali Sheikh.
Jazakallah.
The Sharh of Sheikh Ibn Uthaymeen, which is a very easy to understand, Al-Qawl al-Mufid, is a beautiful one. And he explains every benefit of these masail. He describes it clearly in a very also language that a common person can understand it. But in Arabic, I'm not sure if it's translated.
السلام عليكم.
عليكم السلام.
كيف حالك شيخ؟
الحمد لله بخير.
الذي مات وعليه نذر.
نعم.
ماذا يفعل؟ ما حكمه أو ماذا يفعل ورثته من بعده؟
نعم. الذي مات وعليه نذر. If a person died and he has nadhr, what should the people then do after he dies? They should fulfill his nadhr. يعني يوفون بنذره. If the nadhr is an act of fasting, for example, they fast on his behalf. If it's charity, they give charity. If it's a salah, they don't make the salah. Then they expiate for the nadhr on his behalf by feeding or clothing 10 people. Allah.
For Nazr, I mean, day, like, for example, I will fast one day, and Nazr is like how many people you have to feed?
No. What do you mean? If the nadhr is to fast one day?
Yeah, if it's Nazr one day, how many people you have to feed?
If he's not able to fast.
You're not able to fast, yes.
It's the same expiation as if he made an oath. So if a person made a nadhr to fast one day and he's not able to fast one day, then he should expiate for it by feeding 10 people if he's not able to fast 3 days. Of course, he cannot fast, so it's to feed the people. Wow. No, mashallah. No, mashallah. عليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakum Allahu khairan, Sheikh. Sheikh, last question about nether. What about if it's a continuous nether? Like, say, for instance, somebody said, يعني بينه وبين ربه, oh Allah, if you do this for me, then I will fast 10 days every month or 3 days every month. What is the ahkam on this?
Right. If the nether is forever, he has to fulfill it forever. And that's why some words is like, the same way were the waqf. Love al-waqif ka love the shara. The words of the one that is making endowment is like the words of the shara. So the words of the nadhr is like the words of the shara, the words of the deen. It all depends on what he says. If he said upon himself, or he made a nadhr that he would fast every month 3 days, that means he has to fast every month 3 days.
Till the day he dies?
Till the day he dies.
And then would his family have to continue that?
No. It's only for himself.
على نفسه.
على نفسه فقط. And if he's not able to at a certain point, then he expiate for it. Not that he would start with expiation. He has to be having inability. Then he expiate for it. And some people, they make crazy things like this. I know someone, he came in, he made a vow upon himself. He was in dire need that he would fast every day of his life. In that case, of course, it's not permissible to fast the day of Eid. So which is a good question. If someone does this, say for example, someone made it upon himself that he would fast the first and the second and the third day of every lunar month, right? And this is a nether. Then the month of Shawwal comes, which is the day of Eid, which is haram to fast. Then it's haram for him to fast. He would have to break his fast, and he would have to expiate for his oath and continue every month to fast the first 3 days. Because he broke his nether. And that's why nether, when they say makruh or even forbidden, a person should stay away from it. You make it difficult for oneself. No. The kafara every time he breaks it. If he cannot, then that's it. Yeah, no. If he's not able to fast anymore, then he makes the kafara one time and that's it.
Well, one more question, Sheikh.
If he doesn't want to do it anymore, it's too bad. Because he made it upon himself. No, he has to be not able to do it. If he's bored of, he doesn't feel like fasting anymore, he's the one that made it upon himself that he would fast till the end of his life. So it becomes an obligatory thing upon him. If he's not able to, and it's affecting his life, for example, he's tired, he's not able to go to work, he's not able to do anything, it's affected, then in that case, he should go to a alim and ask him. But if he can make an expiation in that case because he's not able to, but not because it's different or I don't feel like it anymore. And if it's out of anger, this is where a person can expiate for his oath. And this is where they call it nadr al-ghadab or al-lajaj.
So, for instance, Sheikh, if he got weak one month and he did not fast that month, would he have to do kafara for every single day or one time?
No. For the fact that he broke it, then he makes an expiation.
And then he's free from this or no?
No. He has to continue with because the matter is still valid.
Jazakumullah khairah.
Unless he's not able to. No.
Like if you were able to fulfill whatever it is, and is there any benefit hereafter if you make another and then you fulfill it?
The benefit of the nether is, as the Prophet ﷺ said, it got extracted from the greedy person some good deeds. That's the benefit. Because otherwise he doesn't do any good unless he makes nether. So that's the benefit that a person gets from the nether. And then if it happened that he made nether, then since it's an obligation and it's one of the characteristics of the believers that they fulfill their nether, so they get rewards by fulfilling what they obligated upon themselves. But there's no benefit to start with. That's why it should be avoided for a person to make nether.
Stay away from it.
Yes, definitely.
إن شاء الله. السلام عليكم. بارك الله فيك.
سؤال في التجويد شيخ فيصل.
إن شاء الله عندي سؤال مهم.
تفضل.
أنا بعرف شخص، يعني هذا الشخص اللي جنبي صعب عليه يحفظ.
نعم.
هو الله خلقه نفس يعني زي كذا. الحمد لله حفظ الفاتحة، لكنه لم يحفظ التحيات. فقالوا له أهله أن يحضر ورقة ويقرأ التحيات يعني بكل صلاة يقرأ التحيات وبعدها يسلم. يعني هو يعرف اللغة العربية وحافظ الفاتحة. بس بخصوص التحيات إنه هم مهمين يعني عشان يخلص صلاته كلها 100% إلا التحيات.
نعم. السؤال هنا هل هو مكلف؟ يعني عنده شروط صحة العبادة من العقل؟ يعني هل تفهم ما أقول؟
أيوة فاهم.
هل هو مكلف في هذه الحالة أم أنه غير قادر على أن يفهم مثلا الأمور؟ يعني هل هو عنده الأهلية أن يحفظ وأن يصلي وأن يفهم ماذا يفعل ويعرف أن الصلاة مهمة وكذا؟
هو يعرف بكثير أشياء عن الدين بس يعني شنو أقول لك بس عقله مش مكتمل 100%.
نعم. فمسألة طيب you want to speak in Arabic or in English؟ طيب هو طبعا الإنسان إما أن يكون كامل الأهلية أو ناقص الأهلية. فإذا كان ناقص الأهلية فالواجب على حسب النقص. فيجب عليه ما يستطيع ما كان مؤهلا له أو كان عاقلا فيه. فمثلا إذا كان يستطيع أن يصلي صلاة واحدة يصليها وكان بعقله في هذه الصلاة. إذا كان لا يستطيع أبدا فليس رفع عنه القلم، ليس عليه بأس إن شاء الله. في هذه الحالة مثلا لا بأس أن يقرأ من ورقة إذا كان يستطيع ذلك.
إن شاء الله. بارك الله فيك.
الله يبارك فيك.
جزاك الله خير.
But this is an issue if someone is not fit to do, mentally fit to do the ibadah. It depends on the level of fitness. If someone is completely not responsible for his actions, there's no actions, there's no salah, nothing. But if he has some capability, then the obligations to be according to whatever capacity that he has. والذي يسأل في ذلك طبيب مسلم. The one to ask about this is a Muslim doctor in a specialty that he knows this to assess how much is the person responsible for his actions. No. بارك الله فيكم. جزاكم الله خيرا. جزاكم الله خيرا. الله يرضي والله ما شاء الله.